Vice Chair Papp is absent with notice. Chair Beamsterfer?
Here. And now invocation flag salute, Commissioner Clark.
Start with the invocation. Please help us tonight. Please guide us tonight. And please ensure that we all arrive home safely. Thank you for your guidance. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda item number 4 is a public comment period for items not on the agenda. Are there any members public? And are there any public present that would like to comment on an item not on the agenda or on via Zoom?
I don't show anyone online requesting to speak, and I did not receive any e-comments.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're moving on to agenda item number 5 is the approval of the minutes for the meeting of May 21st, 2024. Does the commission have any comments or questions?
I have no comment or question.
I do not.
And may I ask for a motion?
I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 21st, 2024.
I'll second.
And that passes. Moving on to item 6A, work study items, the Commercial Vacay Improvement Grant Program. And we're going to have the city manager give us a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I want to begin by taking an opportunity to introduce to you our new economic development manager, who is Ben Sandoval. I want to credit Ben with a lot of work on putting together the presentation tonight and the staff report and draft program. He's also figured out a way to delegate this presentation to the city manager, so great credit there. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the items on our to-do plan for the current fiscal year. Our strategic plan action items for the current fiscal year began the year with about 80, little over 80 initiatives. We've tried to pace ourselves, so we're still in the 12-month period. And tonight we're bringing you a draft of a commercial facade improvement grant program, and we'll talk more about that. These are programs that you find in a lot of cities. Not every city has a program like this, but when the council put together the budget this year, we appropriated $450,000 of essentially one-time money. We drew upon our robust reserves and appropriated some additional monies for targeted investments, and this is one of those investments that the council targeted this year. When we begin these types of presentations, we also like to bring it back to that strategic plan. So we look at strategic plan integration, and here we're touching on 3 of the 5 pillars of our strategic plan: quality of life, partnership and collaboration, and economic opportunity. Hard to see that on the far side. I better bring up my slides here. So the purpose of this program really is to help encourage investment in some of our distressed commercial assets. So we have designed a program with both a macro perspective as well as a micro perspective. From a micro perspective, we're really talking about smaller businesses and primarily in and around the downtown. And tonight we're looking for feedback on the design of this program, and we welcome any feedback that you want to share with us so that we can present that feedback to the city council. It may shape adjustments that we make before we take this to the city council. Our plan is to take it to the council either next week or 2 weeks later from a timing perspective, and we can implement the program immediately thereafter. But the purpose of the program really is to, as we create more attractive environments, our hope is it drives more sales, ultimately producing more revenue for the city. Obviously, this helps facilitate revitalization of areas that need it. We want to preserve historic downtown structures, so certainly some of this program is focused on that. This program also has an opportunity to leverage private investment. So in the case of the macro version, we are requesting and recommending that there's some skin in the game for the investor. That's not the case in the macro program. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We also want to obviously beautify the commercial corridors by creating pedestrian-friendly and aesthetically pleasing environments for visitors, residents, and tourists. So this is a slide of some before and afters, and what you're looking at is essentially a slide off of the City of Vista's facade improvement program. So you see 4 different examples. The before is on the lower side, and what you see after the fact is above. And essentially, this is a program that really focuses on the exterior, generally the street-facing element of a building. And the focus is on modernizing essentially the exterior of a building. That might be awnings, that might be new windows, that may be a new door treatment. That could be something that it could be paint. There are a number of different elements. We'll talk some more about what those options are. Make sure that you're comfortable with the various types of improvements that could be eligible under this program. But one thing that after I stared at these photos for a little longer, what I also noticed, and maybe this was a clever design by Mr. Sandoval, there are more cars in the top photos than there are in the lower photos. Pretty clever that the City of Vista saw that, but obviously we want to drive traffic and commerce to the businesses. So our program, the draft program, as I mentioned, consists of small micro grants, 1 macro business center grant, and what we're thinking about here is a shopping center. We have a few candidates that we think around town, both on Stetson and on Florida, that would make good candidates should the entire shopping center move forward together. We really don't encourage and would discourage a piecemeal approach to a large shopping center. We do have shopping centers that are owned by one individual. In other cases, we have shopping centers that are owned by multiple people, and I think at least in one case, it's at least 4 different owners. Our expectation would be the entire ownership has to come together and work with the city to take the entire shopping center to a refresh as one project. So that's the vision on the macro. It's really a focus on just one of these per year. We do recognize that in some cases there may be expertise needed, some professional services on design that may be affiliated with lighting. So lighting is another eligible expense. Sometimes lighting consultants can help a business owner understand where to hide some of that lighting, not see it obscure the front of the building. And today there's some pretty elegant strategies there. So there are some modest eligible expenses for architectural and design services. This is the budget I referenced earlier. So initially, I think the initial conception I had was about $350,000 for a large shopping center, and then about $100,000 that we would sprinkle somewhere in town, probably the downtown. As we thought more about the program and really driven by the micro side of this, we decided, and this is really the next slide, that we decided conceptually that the micro grants would be better off at $15,000 rather than $10,000, just given how much things cost these days. That's a number that we welcome feedback on. So for example, if you think 15's not enough and 20 is a better number, that's something we would like to hear from you about today. We are, for example, experiencing some challenges with the trash enclosure grant program that we have live. We have $20,000 grants. That's a lot of money. But some of the early bids on those are coming in even north of $40,000. So we're going to try to work with our staff to value engineer some of those. But this is, that's simply a trash enclosure. $40,000 is a lot of money. We do want to stretch the dollars as much as possible. We want to help as many businesses as possible. But we've landed conceptually on $15,000. We've had an internal struggle with what that matching requirement should be. Frankly, we started at 50%. That's a figure that you'll see in a lot of cities. We then, after further discussion, decided that it would be better to move these projects fast and not necessarily wait for a 50-50 match. So we conceptually penciled in 20%. And after further consideration and looking at a few more cities that have no match for their smaller grants, we've now evolved to a no match requirement on this. So this is again an area where we need your feedback on whether you feel 0 is too small, or whether something like 20 might be a little better to have some skin in the game for the investors. I'm sure that with no match, it will be a little easier for us to find businesses that want to take advantage of this, whether they're businesses or the owners of the building. But that's an area that we'll be looking for feedback on. Obviously, the larger that number grows, we were initially thinking we could do 10 projects minimum. Now we're down to a minimum of 20. I'm sorry, a minimum of 8. And we wanted to preserve a decent amount of money for the larger shopping center. So this is an overview of the micro. The micro grant would be eligible only in the downtown specific plan area. So that's what this map shows you. What we're really talking about is Santa Fe on the east, Gilbert on the west, Acacia, and Devonshire, I believe, for the downtown specific plan. We've decided internally, we wrote up another eligible criteria, which was to extend that to San Jacinto. So take it one block further to the east to get to San Jacinto, in case there are any buildings in that distance between Santa Fe and San Jacinto that would be appropriate for this program. And we've written in eligible any museum adjacent to the downtown specific plan area or inside the specific plan area. So that would include the museum, would also be an eligible entity. The focus, our thinking is Florida should probably be the emphasis here, to encourage the people that drive through to recognize that something's fresh and new and refreshed in the downtown. Something's exciting. And so that's the staff recommendation, is we have a preference for Florida. On the macro grant program, there we go. On the macro grant program, this is really citywide. And again, I think the shopping centers at Yale and Florida, both sides, both east and west, are probably candidates. The shopping centers on the south side of Stetson and State, again, probably good potential candidates for this program. One issue that we recognize and we would like your feedback on is the concept of, because the draft budget for 24-25 includes $450,000 to continue this program. This was always envisioned as a 2-year pilot program or 2-year program minimum. And so we have plugged in $450,000 into the next year's budget. But we recognize that some projects may be substantially more expensive, more costly. And so one area of feedback that we're seeking is, are you open to, on the macro grant only, allowing for the combination of resources from 23-24 and 24-25? So $660,000 of grant money would be available for one project. The match would be $132,000 minimum. And the amount that could be invested could be slightly more than that. Now, there's no limitation on the private sector's contribution. So if they want to put $2 million into the building and there's $660,000 available, great. We love that. It just leverages the city's, the taxpayers' money that much more. So that's an area that we would like to receive some feedback on from you as well. The combination of resources on the macro side. We would probably discourage that on the micro side, just to be able to help more businesses at the same time. Migrating to the grant program eligibility, there are some abbreviations here. So the actual program document has a little bit more explanation, but these are all eligible expenses: historic building renovation, replacement of signage. I think there are a lot of buildings that would benefit from some modernization. of their signage or simply replacement of letters, right? Exterior painting visible from the right-of-way, that's ROW right-of-way. New window or window frames, construction of new facade elements. I think in that photograph from Vista, you saw an awning there, awnings on here too. Construction of new facade elements, installation of permanent landscaping, murals, only with the Planning Commission approval. Exterior facade treatments, new awnings, exterior lighting, new exterior doors, anti-graffiti treatment to existing windows, and outdoor dining or gathering spaces. I want to pause and also explain that from a micro grant perspective, what we're looking for is those to move relatively quickly through our process. So that would require sign off by the community development director as well as the city manager. But on the macro grant projects, we would want those all to go, that one project or two projects if it's 2 different fiscal years. We would want that to go in front of the Planning Commission and receive approval before it proceeds. So that would be a characteristic of this program as well. The attachment to the staff report walks you through an application process. One change that we've made to this program based on the experience with our trash enclosure program. Right now we're requiring 3 quotes for that trash enclosure program. In this program, we're recommending 1 quote with the staff flexibility to ask for additional quotes or to drill down on certain areas where we might want more specific information. So it doesn't limit us to only 1, but it gives us the flexibility to move a little quicker for certainly some of the smaller projects rather than the large ones. And sometimes contractors just don't want to work on smaller projects if they're busy with larger projects. So that's kind of the vision here too. There may be businesses that just want to replace a sign, and we're talking about $1,000 or $2,000, and getting 3 bids for that could be onerous. So you may have questions having reviewed the procedural steps. You may have questions on that. And so with that, we want to open this up for discussion and talk through the issues. I may have Ben help us with some of the answers you may have.
Thank you for that presentation from the city manager. Does this commission have questions for Mark?
Yes,
Input?
yes.
All right, we'll start with at the end, Commissioner Clark.
So in the macro program, I know for a fact some of the existing shopping centers that you identified, facade is not the problem.
Some of the problem,
It is
but not
some
all of it necessarily.
But I know for a fact that new roofs are needed and et cetera. And so you can't bring a business in if the roof's leaking. And is there any expansion for maybe helping out structural, not so much making it pretty, although I get it. There's a lot of dilapidated, I think is, and this money will go to waste if they just do the pretties, because once a business gets in there and it's leaking, which I know one actually does, they're gone. So that's for the macro.
It's an important question because this is an area of feedback, right? So if you're recommending that the criteria become more flexible to include structural elements that enhance the operational ability of the building, we certainly want tenants that are going to stay.
Right.
That's important feedback for us. And I would introduce the concept of the parking lot as well. We know that some of these parking lots are distressed. I'm grateful that the potholes near my cleaners at State and Stetson have been recently filled. But imagine refreshing that shopping center, the Milano's Pizza shopping center, without the parking lot also being cleaned up and some of the landscaping. It just doesn't work, right? So you may want to also consider parking lot type improvements as well, because I think one of the expectations that the city would have is if we're doing the building, we should make sure that the parking lot's been refreshed as well, that the entire facility looks like a brand new building.
And it's hot here during 6 months of the year, really. And so when the trees are gone or there is no shade, there is no incentive. You go in that grocery store and you get out really quick because it's not pleasant. And so I agree wholeheartedly on parking, but I am real concerned on the buildings and their structures. And I know of one owner that has known there's a roof problem for years. And no amount of wedge, and it's not just one, it's an entire shopping center. So to make this very, very appealing to this person, you would need to, help this person bring it up. That's my view.
One thing I didn't mention that comes to mind with your comments is that the program, there's a sentence in the program that explains that anyone with a current code violation or a zoning challenge would not be eligible to participate until those were resolved. So I want to emphasize that is an important characteristic of this program as well.
And that was my next question, especially for the micro. Hornet's nest altogether. So that would be important. And I know there are code violations and lots of things, but the city, while it wants to be helpful, we do have building ordinances. And if that's lacking, then these property improvements shouldn't be going. It should be going to the basics, like earthquake and fire and all of those things. So that's just my view.
I just had a question as far as priorities go. Is it going to be first come, first served based on applications, or is it going to be prioritized based on historical restoration? And
It's anticipated to be first come, first serve. I think with the concept of lowering that barrier to entry on the micro grants, it may be helpful to have some form of a prioritization added to it. Often that may be a ad hoc of the city council. We could also have initial, one approach that we could take is to put together a 30-day application period and then bring those to either a council ad hoc or bringing them to the planning commission for review to receive feedback on priority. And so that may be an area that you would recommend we introduce.
And the only other comment is I wish we had more money, because I know that $15,000 is a coat of paint or maybe just a roof fix, or like you said.
Right. I wanted to I do want to let you know, under CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, some of the cities we've researched do have funding coming from the federal government through that program. And we're going to be seeking CDBG funding in the future to augment any city investment that we're able to make. So we're hopeful that that will grow the value of the program, the ability of the city to make a difference, help the private sector make that difference.
Thank you.
So Mark, I want to commend you and Mr. Sandoval here for putting this together. I've been waiting to see this for a long time. So thank you very, very, very much for this. This is great. So on the micro budget side of things, you said 15,000. I would recommend 30K. But I would also recommend that the applicant put some skin in the game. I wouldn't go 0, but maybe 5% or something like that. But I mean, with the cost of things today, I don't know that 15K would go all that far. Would it really entice them? I don't know. I think they would be on the fence. 30K, I think maybe kind of speaks a little bit more, saying, hey, you know, the city is serious here about helping you get your facade under control. As far as the macro thing goes, that 660K that you talked about, that sounds pretty good. I agree with that. I think that sounds pretty appealing, especially if you got one applicant that is really willing to kick in some cash into this hole, and, you know, depending on how serious they are. I do want to draw your attention to the program procedures, and this would be the applicant intake and eligibility, and it would be section 2, which is review of application. And it's the second paragraph. And in there, it talks about incomplete applications will not be processed until all requested information is submitted. A notification letter will be sent to applicants concerning the approval or denial of the application. Can you kind of explain to me what happens if someone is denied? What specifically would happen in that case? Do they lose their line in the process? I would hate to see somebody be denied because, you know, they're not used to dealing with the city, or, you know, they didn't dot an I or cross a T somewhere, you know?
There may be situations where, let's say that it is a $30,000 grant and it requires a 5% match. And the applicant says, we don't have the 5%. We can do 1, 2, 3, or 4, but we can't do 5. We have to follow the rules of the program, and we would have to deny it. I think your point, though, is we want to really facilitate and work with applicants.
Yes.
And if hypothetically, welcome, Vice Chair. Would you like to? Sure. We'll recognize your arrival.
And just for the record, Vice Chair Papp is present now with us at the meeting.
I think if hypothetically we're moving, let's say for a moment that we're moving from 15,000 to 30,000, even with 4 projects in and around the downtown somewhere, it's, you know, our hope is that this program is contagious also, that it motivates other property owners on their own dime and initiative to update their properties. And that might just be a coat of paint, right? That isn't that expensive, but dresses up. It might be that they fix their sign. But in that case, if we only have 4, I'm not as much worried about processing a lot of applications at the same time. It may be better to implement some form of an enhanced review process on those 4. If there are only 4, let's make sure that those are buildings that deserve investment. And I would feel comfortable slowing that down and bringing those through the Planning Commission.
Okay. All right.
And I think to your point on the denial, we can work on updating that language to explain that we would work before needing to work with the applicant before needing to say no, essentially.
Yeah, that would work out well. I mean, I've dealt with the city planning department before on a personal basis, and it's terrible. I mean, I had a terrible experience. I mean, just this cold wall and sending me a letter with red lines all over my drawings and stuff like that, no explanation, and just, you know, it's just terrible. So I think that if someone gets denied, I would think that you would give them a call instead of just sending a cold letter or an email that says, you know, you've been denied, you know, fail. And they have no repercussion to come back. And how do they come back? You know, who do they see? Hopefully they would see someone like Mr. Sandoval or someone who is trained in this procedure in the program.
I do
Anyway.
agree with that. I think that having one person, if this is somewhat of a pilot program and we want it to be successful, I agree with you to have one person be the quote unquote expert and the one that is the face.
Or personally go out and meet that applicant at their site to talk to them about why they're getting denied or something like that. You know, the personal touch. Again, I want to thank you guys for doing this. This is fantastic. Really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree in both ways. I think $15,000 is not enough these days for, I mean, just replacing this desk probably gonna cost that kind of money. So I agreed 30,000, it goes from 8 to 4 applicants. And I mean, is 20,000 enough versus 30,000 to give an extra business owner another chance? I think the 330,000 should be given to at least more than one opportunity. I think 2 shopping centers should have the opportunity to snag up that kind of grant versus just one person taking it all. The one question I have, and again, I really appreciate the grant situation because the city has this stigma on their back about being very anti-business and turning their back against the business when they're calling for help. And this is just one of many ways that we can approach this business owners and say, we're here to help you a little bit. And I do appreciate the city doing that for the local business owners. One question I have is on, and you're gonna have to give me a scenario, but on page 8 under funding, it says that the last paragraph, city of Hemet has the right to reserve, the right to cancel or to modify this program at any time prior to the grant approval without notice. Continuation of this program subject to sufficient fundings as appropriated. So is it based on the funding alone, or what kind of situation can you give me when it says without notice?
I think we're really talking about a financial emergency, really. If we needed resources and we had to look everywhere for dollars, this would be an example of that, just a bit of a termination notice. And we can, you know, if there's concerns about the language here, I'm sure we can work with the city attorney to modify some of the language to encourage a positive, you know, back to your point about conveying a positive relationship with our customers. We can potentially update that language.
I think communication's everything with these business owners, and the word without notice doesn't, if somebody's waiting to hear good news and there's no good news given and they don't get any notification or call saying, sorry, we ran out of funds or we're unable to move forward with you at this time, but maybe next year. That's how I'm reading this. It's just like, we're not going to tell you if you're going to qualify or not. You're just, that's it, without notice. I just think it should be a little bit more communicated to them if they just are not going to get the opportunity.
Okay.
Have any questions, Vice Chair Pap?
I have one to start with. So did I read correctly that the applications would be processed on a first come, first served basis and not necessarily a merit based?
Initially, tonight, that was the concept. This is one of the reasons we're here, to receive feedback. And some of the conversation that predated your arrival lended towards a lower number of applications and perhaps more engagement on review and prioritization of the potential projects.
Okay, terrific.
Hmm.
I can say that in a previous jurisdiction I worked for, I was responsible for using redevelopment funds for a similar program, and it was very successful. There were many, many more applicants than there was funding available for. So I would encourage community involvement, community engagement, get the word out to business owners about this project. And I think it would be very good PR for the city, as well as free advertising, so to speak, if the program were to continue, to highlight those businesses that participated in the program with the before and after photos, and then demonstrate whether or not the facade improvements actually increase their business over the course of the next year. I think those would be good metrics to use moving forward if the program continues.
Any other questions or inputs?
I do have a question that you bring up the redevelopment. In prior cities that I've lived, redevelopment, especially in the downtown, there has been monies given out. Do we have monies that have been given out? And if so, are any of these businesses or shopping centers paying them back or on the right side of the redevelopment money? How are we gonna have somebody come in that may have in another city or business-wise hasn't paid back a redevelopment loan?
Yeah, my guess is we don't have any, but I'm not familiar with the history here of how many redevelopment dollars were distributed and under what terms. I don't know if staff or the city attorney has any additional insight on that, or former staff.
I am not aware of any, as far as my tenure here.
I'm also not aware of it at this time.
But does that mean it doesn't exist? Those don't exist, or we don't know?
We can certainly look into that, and if that's something the commission would like us to.
Well,
look
I mean, you buy a car, you have a credit check. Do you know, this is money that we're giving out, but there is some skin in the game, like you're saying. And so if there's a history in another city or for whatever reason, but you've got another applicant that wants the same, how do you prioritize if that money is finite? Give it to the first come, first serve, or the the person that doesn't have the ability to really pay it back, or the history versus somebody you're willing to bargain and, give a chance to.
Typically, we wouldn't expect to do a deep credit check on an applicant who signs an agreement to abide by the terms of the grant. It's a grant. If it was, it could be a question that we ask on the application, but we would need to dive deeper to validate whether the answer was accurate, right? It is possible that sometimes with grants that there's a recorded deed against the property for a period of time. So with the $30,000 grants, I probably wouldn't recommend that we do a title search on that. But with a $600,000 kind of concept, then I think that's something that we want to be more careful with.
Don't want to scare them away either.
No, but I do know of a owner that owns hundreds of properties in San Bernardino and Riverside County that have problems. Are we willing to give the money?
I have a question about, so what you're saying is they have 6 months to complete the project of that grant. So at the end of that 6 months and the project is not completed, does the city come back and ask for that money back with interest? Or, I mean, it's a grant, so they really can't do, I don't know.
This is really a reimbursable type of grant, so they would fund the front and they would front the costs, and then we would reimburse them for the project costs, and verify that they're eligible, that all of the expenses were eligible.
Okay. It works for me.
I think the $30,000, just like Commissioner Hill was saying, I think there should be a little commitment fee from the business owner. Like even 5% or for 30,000, 10% is 3,000. So, I mean, 10% is even a fair number to ask to get a $30,000 grant. And that's just like a little commitment fee from the business owner in a way.
It's their business.
Their business, yeah. But I think free is, I mean, we always like free, but I think for somebody to be more dedicated, if they do a commitment fee, they're going to make sure it comes through, it follows through everything. That's just a personal opinion, but I do agree with Commissioner Hill where they should have a little bit of a commitment fee to apply to get that grant.
Yeah. And remember, these are small businesses. I mean, money is tight. So
even 5% is 1,500.
yeah, I mean, it's tough to come up with sometimes.
So you're saying no match?
No, I'm saying I would like to see them put something in. I'm recommending 5%.
5% even fine too. It's just something small.
Yeah.
I may have missed it in here, or if it's not in here, might be a good thing to consider adding. Is there a requirement for a business owner who successfully participates in the program, gets the grant monies for their investment, to hold on to that property for any certain period of time? For example, a property owner might get wind of this grant, take the opportunity to invest in their property, get the money back from the city, and then turn around and sell the building for a higher profit because now the building is worth more, having been improved.
There is not currently language in the agreement, in the program that would be that would tie either the macro or the micro investor to that term. I think the question then becomes a legal question of how we would potentially claw back. I'm thinking about the macro version, right? A little harder with such significant dollars. How do we pull that back, and under what? I think I'd want to consult with legal on what is a reasonable amount of time for us to insist on. It may be reasonable to insist on a year minimum, but I'm not sure whether you have a on the cuff thought on that.
I don't have an on the cuff comment on that. However, I would have to look into what other agencies are doing, such as Vista, to see if they have such a provision in their agreement. And if so, there's no problem for us to include it. However, that does require a little bit more research on. Just a little side question. The entity that you worked on this facade program for, did they have such a provision in their agreements?
Yes, it was with the city of Temecula, so it was for their downtown facade improvement program, but it was strictly funded by redevelopment, which no longer exists.
Okay.
So. I really bring it up only for discussion purposes because, I mean, I'm not even sure if we care if somebody fixes up their building and sells it for profit, because overall they've increased the value of the building. They've increased the property taxes that are going to be collected on that. And that's through the course of history. I just brought it up as a talking point. Don't necessarily have an opinion on it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, small business runs into hard times and they got to sell, and now they're locked into this, but they have a buyer that wants to buy and then move in. And I mean, as long as the building is occupied and it's a thriving business, what do we care, right?
They're in good standing.
Yeah.
You put a roof on a building for $30,000.
Yeah. Is this reimbursable? Is this a progress payment kind of thing, or is it at the end?
This would be at the end as designed. For the larger project, it may be something that we can consider at the request of the applicant. So they may say, interest rates are high. Can you float some of this up front? If we make progress on this, and we can potentially consider some flexibility down the road on that front.
Yeah.
I think with the smaller grants, we would expect them to front the cost.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
At the risk of walking through this all over again, I think it may be helpful for me to kind of reframe this a bit in the context of 4 grants at $30,000 a piece with a 5% match. I want to make sure that I see enough heads that sort of like that mix. This is exactly why we're here. Thank you for raising all of the issues and thinking that through. An additional issue we discussed was the location of eligibility. So clearly on the macro grant, not really an issue. It's available city-wide. The intent is a large shopping center, not a smaller shopping center. So for example, something with just a strip corner, this is not the focus of the program. We're talking, former Alpha Beta shopping center, Long's Drugs, right? Things like this that need a refresh. But with the micro grants, we're suggesting that this be limited to the downtown specific plan, but we're drawing that extra block of Florida all the way to San Jacinto in case there's something in that space. Are you okay with that framework? And then also the edges, essentially, we will envision potentially the Depot Museum potentially be interested in this program for a little bit of work some of their improvements, they believe need a little help as well.
Yeah, anything to beautify the city.
There was feedback on broadening the list of eligible improvements to structural components and parking lot. But we would draw the line at no tenant improvements on the inside. It's really structural and parking lot would be additional eligible uses of the grant. I think given the limited number of these, it would be reasonable for us to probably advertise for a bit, announce a 30 to 60 day application period to give people time to learn about the program, think it over, contemplate their 5% investment or their 20% investment, and then apply so that we cast the net pretty wide and have 4 projects that I think my adjustment would be that we bring these to you for review and prioritization. And then with the council's blessing, we can structure this program where you review those and authorize them to move forward. So feedback on the concept of bringing the 4 projects along with the macro applications to the Planning Commission.
I think macro through planning commission's good. Micro, I don't necessarily need to see. Trust you guys. That's my
It
opinion.
may be hard to decide between 50 projects, right? I don't know how many we're going to see out there, but
Just a little more clarity on the macro. You brought up over 600,000 in this year and next year kind of thing. I would like to see it more separated, 330 kind of thing, instead of doing 600 for one large project. Give 2 shopping centers the opportunity to have that 330,000. If I'm understanding you right, you're giving us the option either separate in 2 or combine in one big one.
right. I think it would maybe depend on the applications that we receive. I think the challenge is if they're trying to limit their contribution to no more than 20%, the money just doesn't go that far these days. And some of the projects may need well north of 7 figures to do their project correctly. I would love to see some of these properties go through a renaissance for only $396,000. I'm afraid, which is about the max that we can do with 66,000 plus 330, a $396,000 project. I'm afraid that we're probably going to need to consider combining some of these. But we would bring those forward to you under this design, and you would help us prioritize how to advance those to construction and award.
I do feel like maybe the first year concentrating in the downtown to see an obvious improvement for projects instead of, expanding it out, having those micro be just in an area where we can really see and people can really see that come into the town. As far as the macro, how are you going to approach the grant if there are obvious building violations or building code violations, and all they want to do is facade?
Well, it says in the procedures that they got to fix those code violations.
They would need to
Code violations.
Yeah.
But if there is not up to building standards that have not,
Same thing.
That's where your inspections are, correct?
that's your inspection.
Yeah.
So they'll know whether or not
Oh, yeah.
that money can go to facade, quote unquote, versus.
Now, if the code violations are exterior, maybe some of that money could go towards fixing the code violations. I don't know. I mean, based on what you said earlier, you want to be able to have them fix just the facade, not limit it to the facade, but anything exterior like the parking lot or maybe
Well, to me, anything a public walks into and the city has liability if they say, oh yeah, here's money for your facade, but the building isn't up to current code. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what they're saying is, and it's written in here that they have to fix that before they get the grant.
code violation.
Yes.
I'm talking about, say you don't have a handicap bathroom.
Wasn't that a code violation?
Doesn't have to be unless it is a building ordinance. But
You're referring to
there's-
like an old building, old
Exactly.
building there. Some things are grandfathered in and
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because some of these are pretty old. How does that work? If you go in and do the inspection and this is an old building and it's been grandfathered and some of the codes,
signage.
the bathrooms are not up to code, are they on the hook now?
I think, because we're focused on the facade only,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that we would enter the building.
Okay.
If the applicant was interested in roof, for example, roof replacement or repair, then that would potentially create a situation where certain code provisions would be triggered. And I'm sure the community development director can expand on that. But I think that that's a good example of something that it would be brought to this body. We would talk about whether that's the right project or not. I do think that the inside, I mean, I have worked in an agency that strongly contemplated authorizing funds for interior improvements as well, internal TIs. We ultimately didn't move forward in that way. But in this case, I feel relatively strongly that the applicant should fix their own building structurally at their own cost, other than the roof that we've talked about tonight. If there are other limitations, they've either known about that or have an obligation to figure out how to make sure that it's compliant. But I think there's going to be thresholds with the construction that may trigger some code improvements. And will you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting discussion because I think when it comes back to the commission, as we identify potential properties, we may identify the potential constraints. With some experience with facade improvement programs in other jurisdictions, I did see that the parking lot was included in it and it took most of the budget. So that would be my initial concern. If we, some of these shopping centers have very large parking lots that are non-conforming, that are, not compliant to today's standards. But there is ways to beautify it, and we want to be able to bring you some options to discuss and to see. Also, we also need the advisement of a design consultant that can identify some potential constraints to construction. Because, reskinning is one thing, but, when you start, demolishing the structure or altering the structure, we want to make sure that it's compliant. And then also that we're meeting today's building codes as well. So those are the discussions that we would have as we bring these options before you, and as well as the micro too. I also wanted to just confirm that I understood to the commission that the structural component, the discussion about structural, is that just for macro? Okay, so the micro would be okay.
This is going to be very interesting.
You know what, I'm gonna go back and just because of there just seems to be a lot of scope creep here. We're going from facades to parking lots and structural components. As if I was a tourist, I wouldn't care if you had a new parking lot. I'm not gonna drive to see a new parking lot. I'm not gonna see your new roof. But if you got a bunch of pretty painted facades, that might be something I'm gonna drive to. If we stick it to just what we're looking here at facades, I'm gonna go for it. But I really don't want to see the scope creep.
Yeah. Well, I think we're giving them the flexibility to expand to that. The whole idea is for the facade, and I would think that would be the priority. But, if you start looking at the facility, you start looking at the business and, there might be a little tweak you can make to the roof or something like that. And this would give the flexibility of being able to expand to that. I don't think it would be a priority. I think the advertising and the marketing of this would be the facade program. To your point.
I'm thinking, come and see our pretty buildings, or hey, we're structurally sound. Come and check out our roof. I don't think that's going to bring in any tourists.
Yeah.
When it comes to signage, how would that affect? Because we are gonna deal with a lot of older buildings. And if you're wanting to expand down to St. Settle, that stretch there on Florida Avenue has a lot of little individual buildings with their own design, their own uniqueness. A lot of it's all been grandfathered in over the years. So if somebody wants to come in and put a light behind their sign that's been there for 60, 70 years, it's been grandfathered in. And the city goes, well, you know, you can't do that because then you have to tear the whole thing down and you can't put that sign anymore because you're grandfathered in. How is that going to work for business owners that have structures or a property that has a lot of grandfathered in clauses that may come into effect while redoing the frontage?
Well, I think those are issues that we're going to have to analyze as we bring them forward to you and identify, essentially spot those issues, present them to you, receive feedback. We want to obviously work within the limitations of the code. And I'm thinking about those properties between Santa Fe and San Jacinto and imagining that there could be situations like that. And I also imagine that there could be some of those businesses that just want a sign, right? They're not going, we may be able to do more than 4 projects with a micro grant because we may have half a dozen that come in with $1,000 project and you all agree that this is an opportunity to stretch those dollars to a few more businesses. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what shows up, but it's going to be our challenge to make sure that we really share news about this widely and figure out a way to probably pepper all of those micro grant opportunity, any site within the micro grant area with leaflets and probably letters and other efforts. So that'll be part of our challenge, is just getting the word out. But I like the idea of an application period that may need to go beyond 30 days so that we have that opportunity to present you more than 1 or 2, right? That they don't just drip in, that there's a large volume.
Any other questions or discussions or ideas? Well, thank you very much.
Take my opportunity to get one more in. Might there be any opportunity for the city to identify some buildings that might benefit from participating in this program? I don't recall if the city's zoning ordinance has an amortization clause for non-conforming structures or signs or things of that nature. But if there are, and if those have been documented over the years, perhaps businesses could be encouraged to remove those unsightly, amortized, non-conforming structures or minor structures and replace them using this program. So I was just curious if there's an opportunity for the city to get involved and possibly identify some, not necessary business, necessary.
I think it's a good idea. I'd like to volunteer for that role. And I'd like to annex the corner of Stanford and Florida and offer the sign that's halfway onto the building. You know what I'm talking about, right? Can we annex that and put it into this program? I'll spot that as item number 1. It's an eyesore, but yeah, I think there are a lot of locations that we see that would make sense. And I look at a couple of them across the street from my office every day and think that could change. And so I do think there are some properties that we should target. And we've done that with the trash enclosure program too. We've reached out to certain businesses that have trash enclosures that are visible, unsightly, prone to graffiti, and we're encouraging their participation in the program. So I think the same thing can be done here.
And on page 6, just regarding the contractor requirements, it probably goes without saying, but it is not listed here that a contractor would be required to have a city business license. I would recommend that that be added in.
Thank you.
They could obtain their city
It's
business license.
it's listed in the last sentence there. It looks like under D, below D.
Oh, I just saw
it's
the state
buried-
contractor's license.
It says business license, but it's buried there in the bottom of that paragraph under number 2.
The comment of the. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great presentation, and it's good to hear business owners able to get a little bit of help from the city here. Okay, so we're moving on to item 7A, City Attorney Report. City Attorney Sori.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to 7B, Community Development Reports, Director Monique.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to report.
All right, now moving on to 7C, Future Agenda Items, Director Monique.
Future agenda items coming before you in the summertime will be environmental justice element and the safety element, as well as Freddy's Restaurant drive-through. And JD Fields development, we are working through that right now. We're getting close, as well as High Point Apartments will be coming to the Planning Commission this summer. That is all I have.
Thank you very much. And item 7D, Planning Commissioner Reports, Director Monique.
Commissioner Clark?
It's not really a report. I'm wondering how the different departments are being scheduled to come and talk with us. When can we expect to talk to NOAA and find out how Public Works is going and that sort of thing?
Yes, so at our last commission meeting, I understand the commission is interested in hearing back on what is happening with our CIP projects. I will be working with NOAA on identifying when we can come back to the commission. My hope is that he can come back in the next couple cycles of our commission meeting to just to speak on what our capital improvement programs are. And it also sounded like what street improvement plans or what's the phasing and the plans for street improvements.
Because to me, it's like, I've said it before, pin the tail on the city. I'd like to know what they've got going right now and what's coming down the pike. It is something, I mean, we've got infrastructure, we've got all kinds of stuff. It's great that we had a workshop today, but there is still was time for a second agenda item. Was there something that we could have squeezed in? There are a lot of responsibilities with us, and we're not even touching on any of them other than what comes in at that time. So that's why I'm saying I'd like to stop playing a game and just have someone come in, even the new building. Do we know who the new building department head is?
We currently have an interim building official
Hmm.
who's on a contract with the city
Ah.
and is representing at this time. He's fulfilling the interim position of the building official. And what I can do for the commission as well, so that there's not a lag in information that's being provided. The Public Works Engineering Division has obtained approval of a capital improvement program through the city council. What I'd like to do is in the interim, and I'll also follow up with a memorandum to the commission at our next commission meeting, is what the Public Works Engineering Department is doing. And then we can follow up with NOAA, the director, city engineer, on future items that will be coming back to the commission for consideration. So yes, I agree. I think it's important that you are aware and are informed on what's happening with our city capital projects.
And in the building in particular, we've got a downtown, we've got all what are some of these people's obstacles? We need to know. What are they encountering and what's coming down the pike in the building department? Or I don't know. I'm not saying that they're coming to us to report. We're not city council. I just want to know what they got on their plates right now, what they see coming in or what's been approved, and how can we help them?
Yes, and Commissioner Clark, I absolutely agree. We are working on providing more transparency to the public, to the community on what's happening on the development front. Our economic development manager here tonight can attest to that we need to provide more information to the public, to let the public know where we are in the pipeline on all things development. So we're working on the back end on some upgrades to our website that will include, construction information, projects that are under construction, that are in application, pending processing, that are already entitled. Where are they? You know, are they in building plan check? Are they being reviewed? Have they been issued? So that you have that information, available to you.
Nice.
I would like that. I would like a little update sometime because I know like a local business owner that we discussed. You know, he's been leasing a spot for over a year and still we finally are moving forward a little bit from what I know, but it took a year and a half almost for him to get an answer like that. And, you know, things like that, if we see what's coming down the tubes, a business like that, I could say, well, what's going on with this business that we talked about? And I agree. I agree that we should see kind of what's coming up, what upcoming projects from Public Works. And, I agree.
Thank you. Commissioner Ochoa,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Hill,
Yes, thank you. Just want to let the staff know and commission here that I will be out of town for the next meeting. Absent.
you. Vice Chair Pap.
I was just curious to know if there were any interesting conversations at the ICSC conference that might invite some wonderful new businesses to the city of Emmett.
Yes, absolutely. The ICSC was quite a success, and this time it was bigger and better than in prior years. I feel because we had a team just, you know, to launch out there and reach out to new businesses. Our economic development manager, Ben Sandoval, he did an excellent job of preparing in advance for the meeting. And it was quite fruitful, which has brought us several meetings with potential interested developers and businesses to bring into the city. Yes.
And
Well, so at our last commission meeting, I did indicate that we reached out to Miguel Junior's on behalf of Commissioner Hill. So we did reach out to their corporate and we will be following up to see we can leverage a conversation with them.
thank you.
Along similar lines, it's hard not to notice in the media these days, newspapers, internet ads or stories. There's a lot of chain restaurants, a lot of chain businesses that are going to be closing their doors, especially in California. Do we have any knowledge about any locations that might be closing here in Hemet and when that might be happening?
I have not heard of any chains at this time.
Chili's, I believe, is closed.
The Hut, several others, Red Robin. Yeah.
And I read Red Lobster is closed now.
Chili's is pretty much across the board. Everyone's going, where'd they go?
Applebee's is another one. Just, you know, we get a whole lot of revenue from the sales tax from those establishments, and it'd be nice to know that they are in fact doing well here in Hemet and will continue to keep their doors open. But if there are any announcements regarding any of those chains closing, we need to start working on some sort of contingency plan.
Thank you. Chair Beamstrofer?
I'll go ahead and have Gus or Gustavo put up that picture if he can, but it's a funny little joke, well, not a joke, but a funny little story, but Seaside, a city in Seaside, there was a house that had a boat and neighbors were complaining about it. And the city decided to give him an ultimatum to build a fence to hide the boat or pay the fine. And so he built the fence and had a neighbor paint a picture of his boat on the fence so that the neighbors can still see the fence there. So I think that was a kind of clever loophole from the homeowner there. Also, another interesting article I read in the news recently is that in South LA, they're considering, it's not approved, but they're considering building an apartment complex with Costco incorporated into it. So it's gonna be a Costco building and a 800 unit apartment complex above it. And of that 800 units, I believe it was 180 some or 160 some were for affordable housing that they incorporated into that project,
Hmm.
which is kind of a unique idea that maybe other cities start looking into. I know we would love to have Costco, but I don't think they'll ever come to our town, but other grocery stores or other centers that are here for a long stand, maybe look into some ideas like that, get some stores involved in in the apartment complex. Also, let's see here. Oh, I noticed on Stetson, they did cut down those weeds there in that shopping center that we've been talking about in State and Stetson right there. It looks a lot better. In the city portion, the parking, the actual shopping center still needs some care, but the city portion did their job to cut it down. It looks a lot better. And any updates on downtown with the red tag buildings? I know we gave them dates and ultimatums and timeframes, and people are asking about that, like what's happened. All we see is the paper up there, but again, nothing has moved forward. And what is the update in that situation? Do we know?
Yeah, so that is working through our city attorney's office with the property owners. Yes.
A lot of legalities behind it, but is it moving forward? Is it still on a standstill, or are we back to disappointment again? What's happening with all these red tag buildings?
I am not working on the code enforcement pertaining to that issue. I know several attorneys in our office are working on that. I could inquire with them. Absolutely. I don't have any updates at this point.
Just know people are asking. I'm like, well, we're working on it. So, okay, nothing else to report. And with nothing else to report, with no further business to discuss, this meeting will be adjourned to next planning commission meeting scheduled for June 18th, 2024 at 6 p.m.